Just waiting for everyone to join. We've added, or we've opened the waiting room now for everyone to join. So I'm just making sure that everyone is in. Um, so welcome everybody. I think we have around 20 people left. But I'll get started in introducing myself and introducing everyone to the meeting, the fantastic meeting we have today. So I'm Hussein Said. I will be chairing the meeting tonight. I myself am an anti-racist. I'm part of Stand Up to Racism. Based in Cardiff, so I'm chair of Stand Up to Racism Cardiff. I'm also a human rights lawyer, and I'm obviously involved in the huge campaign that we're hoping to build against reform in the coming May elections. Obviously, here we have the Senate elections, the national elections in Wales. So this is a really important meeting, and this right here is the launch of the whole of the UK, essentially the Stop Reform campaign, pushed by Stand Up to Racism, headed by Stand Up to Racism. We want to mobilize, and I think we all know the task we have on our hands, which is potentially a far right government, really, in Reform UK, Nigel Farage, with his demonizing of refugees and all those the most vulnerable in our society. We're looking to launch a campaign that can get thousands upon thousands of people on the street mobilizing. We want to distribute hundreds of thousands of leaflets. We want to target wards, and we want to really just break that reform vote. And I think we can do that, but this is an absolute essential step in being able to do that, which is getting people mobilized, because we're not backed by the billionaires like Reform. We're backed by people power, and that's why we're here today, and that's why we have such an amazing panel of speakers that can speak about the union movement and all the different localities that they're in. So I'm really happy to introduce the meeting today. If you're involved, if you want to be involved, I should say, which I would ask everyone to be, we have 500 people here already. Essentially, we had over 1,300, I believe, that signed up to register for the meeting today. So we do have the people, but we need to get people mobilized. So if you are interested in beating back the biggest far right surge we've seen in our lifetime, and we obviously saw what the Together Alliance was able to do, we're getting 500,000 people on the. Oh, sorry, 1 second. My battery is running out. Sorry about that. If we want to get everybody in on the street, then we need to mobilize and we need to get people involved. So there's a form that you can fill out to join the campaign, which you can find. So please do be involved. But without further ado, I should say, let's get on to the speakers. And I want to introduce Michael Bradley, who's a Stand Up to Racism organizer. So Michael, if you'd like to take over and get this meeting started, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Hussein. Look, we're come together tonight in these kind of numbers because, like Hussein said at the start, we're facing one of the biggest challenges that our generation's ever faced. This is the biggest attempt by the far right to organise an electoral level that we've ever seen in this country. And it comes alongside a situation where we've also got the far right mobilising on the streets. We saw in September Tommy Robinson, a fascist, leading a demonstration with something like 150,000 people onto it. So in some ways, we've got a kind of perfect storm that's beginning to develop. And if reform breakthrough in the elections in England, Scotland and Wales on the 7th of May, it will make a big difference to people's lives in a number of ways. The first thing is it's going to legitimise all the divisive rhetoric, all the attacks and scapegoating on refugees and migrants that we've seen on the Muslim community and others from reform. Secondly, it's going to mean a stepping up of the attacks on the services that working class people depend on. And it's also going to mean fundamentally a massive increase in the divisions inside our communities and inside our workplaces. So there's a huge amount at stake about what happens on the 7th of May. And one of the most frustrating things about this is we know that the reason why Farage and the people around him are able to make such progress is everything they say is being legitimised by what is the mainstream of politics. Whether it's the comments from Keir Starmer about Britain now being an island of strangers, or whether it's Bad Enoch and the Tory party, or whether it's the media. Every day, the kind of divisive rhetoric, the targeting of those arriving in small boats, and the rest of it is supported by those people who are supposed to be the doers in societies. And so they've had an easy ride in lots of ways, reform, right? They face very little challenge often, right? Stuff to the kind of ideas that they're pushing across. We also know that the racist rhetoric, the scapegoating, the talk about a British ICE being brought onto the streets and the rest of it hides something else, which is an absolutely vicious anti-working class set of politics, which is in favour of the wealthy in society, of backing the employers against those in the workplaces, of selling off our National Health Service, of breaking our trade unions and supporting the mega rich. This is what they're about, right? Stuff, and the idea that in some ways Nigel Farage represents an organisation that's insurgent or supports what they describe as the white working classes is really a complete standing of the truth on its head. You only have to look at the number of ex-Tory cabinet ministers that are lined up to see what these people's agendas are, right? This is Thatcher, right, and stuff souped up for the 21st century is what reform is about. And that can all sound pretty depressing. But there is an alternative to this, isn't it? And many of us here took part in it. When you look round on the 28th of March and you looked about you, when you saw 500,000 people out on the streets, all the things that we've talked about the fact that the vast majority of ordinary working class people in Britain are decent, want unity in their communities and workplaces and the rest of it, it was there, wasn't it? Trade unions, NGOs, campaign groups, people bringing their families onto the demonstration, people from different faith organisations coming together on that protest. And we know now, even if we didn't before, that we genuinely are the anti-racist majority inside Britain. So the question is, what do we do now to mobilise those people and to make them a big factor in the election to come? We've really got to try to convince people both to come out and vote and to use their vote against reform, but also that they can play a role. There are things that they can do. It's not just something that is beyond their control. And so therefore, we're trying to do a number of things. And obviously, this is going to be developed in the course of the meeting tonight. The first thing, so far as a start, alongside with the support of the National Education Union and other unions, we've produced 150,000 tabloid newspapers to go through the doors in constituencies across Britain, right? Stuff taking on the arguments of reform and arguing with people to go out and use their vote. We're planning to produce 1 million leaflets during the election campaign, 5-point quick election flyer that you can have a quick look at, 5 reasons to use your vote against reform, right? Stuff. We want to use popular materials that can help mobilise people to come out of their houses and vote and to get involved. And we're calling for 2 big days of action during the course of the election. That's on Sunday the 19th of April and Sunday the 3rd of May. But don't wait for a day of action. What we're really saying is, if you're involved with Stand Up to Racism or you want to get involved, hold organising meetings in your community, your town or your city, get people together, get what they describe as a coalition of the willing together and start talking about what we can do to make a campaign that hits their vote, right? Stuff that starts getting materials out, stalls in the street, campaigning at work, campaigning in the communities and stuff, and starts to get the momentum that we gained on the 28th of March into the election campaign, right? And stuff around it. And that's why when Sam was talking about signing up, leave your name, leave your details. We want to put you in touch with people in your town or city or in your workplace or in your union who you can get involved with as well. Just the last thing to say really is this, that we know we're living through historic times, don't we? Right, stuff. Every day you turn your TV on, right, stuff, and see something else that seems to be getting worse. But we also know that people want to do something here. They want to resist, and that you see it in this country. You saw it in the United States with No Kings protest. You saw it over the weekend in Paris, where 150,000 people were demonstrating against racism there. we can make a difference in this situation, right? We can knock them back. And every vote we mobilise against them, and everybody who comes out and does something in that situation is another blow to their attempt to get into 10 Downing Street. And we know what that would mean. Just look across the Atlantic and look what a Farage government would look like. Trump. That's exactly what it would look like. So there's a lot at stake, but the turnout on the demonstration on the 28th, the turnout tonight shows that people do want to get involved, do want to organise, and we can drive the far right back.
Thank you so much, Michael. Obviously, Michael is one of the main forces behind that fantastic demonstration, the Together Alliance demonstration. And somebody who we should all be listening to in terms of mobilizing against the far right. So I want to introduce our next speaker. And I think this speaker represents something that really needs to be the foundation of this mobilization of forces, which is the workers' movement. So I do want to introduce Fran Heathcote. Fran Heathcote is the General Secretary of the Public and Communications Union, PCS, and we know that workers will be on the front line and PCS will be on the front line against reform and other far-right influences and parties on the 7th of May. So take it away, Fran. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Hussein, and thanks everybody that's joined tonight. I think these meetings like this are so important because they really are where we can focus on what we need to do next. The 28th of March was fantastic, but the whole discussion now needs to be about what do we do next? Because across England, Scotland and Wales, there are really vitally important elections coming up on the 7th of May. Farage and his Reform Party are a threat to trade unionists, to workers and to all working class communities, but somehow they developed that mirage of respectability, and we need to expose the truth. They don't offer solutions. They offer scapegoats, somebody to blame for everything that's wrong. Nigel Farage is confident his party is going to make sweeping gains in England, Scotland and Wales, but we can stop him in May, just as we've done before. Earlier this year in Greater Manchester, Reform was confident that they could take the seat of Denton and Gorton in the by-election, but they were comfortably beaten because people united behind a progressive alternative, and that's what we need to keep doing. Last year in Wales, Reform thought they could win the Caerphilly by-election, but again, the people there united behind a progressive alternative, and Reform came a distant second. So Reform can be stopped, and together we can stop them. Our union, PCS, doesn't support any political party. We are an independent trade union and our sole interest is the interests of our members. And that is why we reject the politics of Nigel Farage and of Reform. The people making life tough for my members are not migrants. They are low-paying bosses. They are the landlord jacking up rent or the bank hiking your mortgage rates. It is the energy and the water companies that are hiking your bills. And whose side is Reform on in terms of all of that? They voted against the new employment rights for workers. They voted against new rights for renters. They are funded by the corporate interests that are ripping us all off. We need politicians who are going to stand up to the people with power, not politicians who whip up hatred against the weak. At the last general election, Reform's manifesto was an unrelenting attack on trade unions, on workers, on social security and on public services. They promised huge cuts to public services, job cuts for public sector workers and huge tax cuts for the super rich and for corporations. So again, we need to ask ourselves, in whose interests do they operate? In councils, they have won before. We have seen them make cuts, attack public sector pensions and hike up council tax. They are a disaster for working class people and for communities. And I just want to finish really with a bit of a story. It's a true story based on an industrial dispute that we in PCS won, because last year a group of our members in PCS scored a massive victory. Those workers are employed as cleaners, security guards and caterers in some of the richest buildings in the country that house some of the richest businessmen in the country. They work for multinational corporations with CEOs who are earning seven-figure salaries, working on outsourced government contracts, and yet they weren't even paid the London living wage. They were working class people who had never ever been on strike before. Some of them had never joined a union before. Some were born in Britain and some were migrants to this country. But they united together, they went on strike together for months and they won. Not just fair pay, but better terms and conditions, contractual sick pay, paid parental leave, and so much more. But more than all of that, they won respect as well, and they were able to go back to work with their heads held high. And that is what we achieve when we unite working class people. Trade unions do that day in, day out, and that is why the Tories and Reform, funded by tax dodging billionaires and corporations, attack trade unions and want to divide working class people. Unity is our weapon to defeat the far right, to win better conditions at work, and to become a better country. It is not about trade unions or anybody else outsourcing our work against the far right. It is about us coming together with the biggest coalition that we can muster to reject division. So let's join together on the things that do unite us and not get hung up on the issues that we agree on. There is always room for division within the trade union movement. We all know that. Everybody on this call tonight knows that. And yet this is an issue that we can all unite around. And the more we unite and the more we stand together and the more we're joined up, and the harder it becomes to divide us and the harder it becomes to defeat us, and the easier it becomes to defeat organisations like Reform. So in May, let's reject the politics of hate. Make sure that you're registered to vote by the 20th of April. Make sure that your friends, your family, and your fellow workers are registered to vote as well. Make sure you use your vote to stop Reform. Talk to colleagues about the importance of voting. Start conversations at work and in communities about the importance of the need to cast our votes and what Reform and Farage actually do stand for. I think that people who think Farage is a bit of a laugh, often posing with a pint in his hand, often haven't really thought about what his interests are in all of this, why he is anti-union, and why it is in the interests of him and his like within big business not to promote workers' rights. It isn't a coincidence that Reform rejected every aspect of the Employment Rights Bill before it became an act. It isn't a coincidence that they mock health and safety legislation as being just more red tape. It is because the rights gained under the Act and via health and safety legislation are what stands in his way of being able to just make more and more profit at workers' expenses. So it is really important that we do everything we can to unite people. It's our job to expose all of this, and the clock is ticking. We have not got a second to waste. We need to do everything we can to join up. We need to do everything we can to stand in solidarity and not let those side issues divide us. There will be things we disagree on. There will be, tactical issues that we don't always agree on, but we resolve them by talking to each other, by engaging with each other, by coming to meetings like this, by talking to people in our workplaces and our communities. It is our job to do all of that. So let's tonight unite together to stop Reform. Let's stand in solidarity to everybody on the call tonight, and I look forward to seeing you in the campaigns that lie ahead. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Fran. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, it's all about unity. Sadly, sometimes the elites have more cohesion than we do as the working class, which is why we do need to unite. And united, we will never be defeated. So, what I want to do next, I wanted to give some time for some contributions, two contributions. So, I'm going to give 2 minutes well, like I said, two contributions each. So, if people could raise their hands, that would be great. And we want to be able to sort of get good contributions in so that we can, hear what people have to think and make this, as Fran said, speak to each other, not just have people talk at you, but also all of us can contribute. So I'm going to bring in Gina from Coventry and Warwickshire Stand Racism, if that's okay.
Hi,
Two,
yeah,
if
yeah.
that's okay.
Coventry and Warwickshire stand up to racism and women against the far right. And I just wanted to talk quickly about what fighting reform in the elections has looked like for us, like locally. So obviously we have George Finch, but he's also now like running. I believe he wants to be a councillor, not in just in Warwickshire, but in Bedworth at the moment. So we're looking at find that. And I believe today he literally skipped a community event in Leamington to go to Bedworth because Nigel Farage was there. And I feel like that's something that we need to talk about. We need to show like he's not like reformer, not for the people. They're for the millionaires, the billionaires, because George Finch literally did not go to a community event because Nigel Farage was in Bedworth, so he went to go see him as well. But we think we wanted to get advice on if we can do like local specific leaflets, because obviously we want to talk about one that talks about well, not, I don't know if we can name people, but be more specific about what's happening in Coventry and Warwickshire. So obviously we've had a lot of far right groups like Patriotic Alternative and Homeland quite recently, since they were in and eating on literally the 28th of March. So there is like quite a big threat, not only on the street movement of the far right, but also with reform. And so we've been trying to counteract that by doing leafleting. We've had great comrades leafleting in Leamington and Eton, things like that. But we think that it does need to be more of a grassroots movement, and we're working with loads of other people. But one of the main things that we're talking about at the moment is if we can be more specific, or if there are things that we can't really say, because obviously we don't want to get sued and things like that. But obviously, because yeah, it is quite a big threat at the moment, and everyone's working like great, but we need to like have more concrete, and that's why we have a meeting. We're having our first organising meeting Thursday. It's an open one at a local cafe where we've invited loads of people, and we're going to try and have a Palestine Solidarity representative as well, because obviously the 16th of May. But yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Gina. Okay, yeah, it's great to hear about what we can do locally and how we can fight the far right in our own locality. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to bring in our second contribution. So I'll bring in Amin Hadi. That's okay. 2 minutes. Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah. Fran mentioned the Gorton and Denton by-election. It was really important that we went out leafleting to say use your vote to stop reform. We didn't campaign for any particular party. We did have people like Hannah Spencer come and join us, and councillors from Labour as well at our launch event. But we made sure that we leafleted the whole of the constituency, over 30,000 leaflets we got rid of, with that simple message of use your vote. And it's so powerful that we do that. And it's important that we do that because people often want to be armed in the arguments. And we're the only ones that will explain why reform are packed full of Tories, all the arguments that Fran and Michael have used already, that they're Donald Trump supporters, that they attack the working class, that they're racist. We're the only ones putting that clear argument out there. So it's really important we do that to restrict the vote. But all these things need to go hand in hand, building together, building a counter protest to the 16th of May. And sometimes those things are difficult. I've got myself, unfortunately, in this situation at the moment because we invited Hannah to speak and we had a rally, and unfortunately they were attacked by the far right. And these things are so important that we then launch into finding the widest possible coalition to trade unionists in that scenario, because we need to forge the maximum unity if we want to defeat the far right. That's what was so incredible about Together in London last weekend. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ramin. And 100%. And I think somebody just commented about that experience in Caerphilly, which isn't far from Cardiff. And that was, such a fantastic experience where we were able to beat back reform in a place where they invested so much money, yet they lost. So I want to just introduce one last person, if that's okay, because it's so great to have him here. It's Dr. Wajid, the Secretary General of the Muslim Council of Britain. It's fantastic to be joined by him and by the Muslim Council of Britain as well. And that would be such an important, of course, we know reform is so Islamophobic. So it would be great if we could hear from you, Dr. Wajid, if you'd be happy to speak for a bit, if that's okay.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone on the call, for all the amazing work that you're doing. One thing I'm acutely aware of is that we're all on the same team, but sometimes we don't necessarily work together. We work alongside each other. And as the clock is ticking and we're getting closer to the registration deadline on the 20th of April and the local elections, it's more important that we actually work together. So if you are in a location, if you're on a ward anywhere in the country where you may be struggling to reach out to the Muslim community in your ward, I'm going to put down our email address. Email us and we will connect you. We'll do the introductions, because quite often our community needs to get up and become more politically active. I know there are pockets that's getting there, but there are also a large majority who just aren't really sure which way to go, and they just need someone to light the fire, and you guys are the ones to do it. So I'm going to share our email address. Email us, and we'll do our best to connect you with your local Muslim community. Do an introduction, maybe find someone who can act as a bridge so that we can work together to make this country better. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Majid. That was fantastic. And such a useful resource as a Muslim myself. This is such an important element of this fight back, which is the Muslim community who have been demonized. I mean, we have been demonized for how long? Really, it's so important that we do mobilize all these different people and all these different communities to come together as one. So I do want to keep encouraging people to use the sign up link that we are going to be posting in the chat. People have mentioned, how do we get involved? How do we actually, put boots on the ground? Well, this is it really. Sign up, get involved in your local Stamps Racing group. But the first thing to do is sign up with that link in the chat, meet people, like-minded people who also want to fight back against the rise of the far right. And we can do it. I mean, it's been seen. And I think the next speaker is such a fantastic example of that. So I want to introduce the deputy leader of the Green Party, involved in booting out reform from Gorton and Denton in Manchester when they thought they were going to, had the chance of winning that. And obviously Hannah Spencer absolutely destroyed them. And a big part of that campaign, of course, was the deputy leader of the Green Party, Mothin Ali. So of course, I'm incredibly proud to introduce Mothin to speak to us today. Thank you so much, Mothin.
Thank you very much for having me. I mean, this kind of event is very personal to me. Um, when we have these sorts of rise of the far right, I mean, I grew up at a time when Paki bashing was still a thing, right? Um, Literally, we'd have to dodge the gangs that were waiting outside of our school gates to beat us up. And at the Together Alliance, it's an experience that for the first time I shared in public. My first experience of racism was when I started primary school, and I was beaten up and then urinated on. Um, and that was as a primary school kid. Now I that's something that I was always afraid to talk about, but I'm worried that if we don't share these stories, then we don't learn from them. And the risk is my kids, your children, are going to have to face this sort of thing going forward. So it's more important than ever with the rising tide of the far right that we stand up towards them. Because there's two elements of the far right now. There's there's the sort of far right that are committed and those who are far right adjacent. Now, those who are committed, they come in two branches as well. You've got the street movement thugs, and you've got the political class. And unfortunately, Reform are representing the very best of their political class. You've got you've got committed racists in there that just because they code the language a little bit, and instead of using Paki, they use Islamist. We've got to get away from this sort of framing as well. Um, Now, with these kind of people, we've got to challenge them head on. We've got to challenge them on the streets, and we've got to challenge them at the ballot box. There's no there's no space for these people. But those who are sort of thinking of voting for people like Reform, for me, the approach to them is a little bit of compassion. And I've got that compassion in me to give to them because they're not voting for reform because they love reform's policies, and they're not voting for reform because they think this is the best thing since sliced bread. They're fed up. Working class jobs have been cut. They've been decimated. Deindustrialization has led to massive loss of communities, and people are struggling, really struggling out there. I represent one of the poorest communities in the whole of England, and it's one of those communities where you'll regularly get phone calls as a local councillor from parents who are struggling to feed their kids, who are struggling to heat their homes, who are struggling to buy their children the right school uniforms. And that's all the time. And when they see the Labour Party and the Conservative Party just regurgitating the same old, and they don't see a change, they get desperate. And those people are easy to prey on. And that's what vultures like the Reform Party, the Restore Party, and any other iteration, they prey on the vulnerable. So we showed what class solidarity looks like. In Gorton and Denton, we ran a campaign that was really positive, that cut through, that we communicated it in a language and in a way that people could relate to. And I heard some mention of leaflets before, so I'm going to just touch on that quickly. We ran an experiment in Leeds, actually, in Morley. Um, the Green Party stood against the Reform's first elected councillor in Leeds. And we ran a little bit of an experiment. So we ran some stand to racism leaflets, we ran some negative campaigning, and we ran some positive campaigning. And the areas that we ran the positive campaigning did much better in terms of return on votes than where we ran the negative campaigning or we ran the stand up to racism leaflets. So in our messaging, we've got to bear that in mind. What I mentioned at the start is those people who are really desperate and they're being preyed upon by reform. We can't just, if we just call those people racist and start calling those names and go down the route of name calling, we're just going to drive them further into their hands. And this is the failing, one of the biggest failings of the Brexit campaign. Is one of the reasons that Remain lost Brexit was because the left resorted to name calling. And this is one of the things that we've got to really, really learn a lesson from. And while I'm here, I don't know how much longer I've got, but while I'm here, there's one important thing that we've always got to remember is there's a lot of racism on the left as well. And this is something that we've got to deal with. There's lots of people who will like to tell black and brown people what to say and how to say it. And try and teach us about racism. And this is something that we've got to make sure that when we're reaching out and we're trying to bring people in, if we want people to jump on our movement and join with us, take on their experiences, take on their life lessons, and we teach and we learn from them. And that's how we evolve. There's lots that people can offer. There's lots of real life experience. It's all of that comes together to build a mass movement. That's how we build something that's going to be powerful and going to go on into the future. And it's not going to start fraying as soon as we get a little bit of pressure, because we have to continue building together. We have to be continuing to work together, building together, and making sure that we can defeat the far right. Because I am worried. I am worried. My own ward, one of the most diverse wards in Leeds, is at threat of a reform councillor. Now just think about that. Gipton and Hare Hills. Hare Hills, I think it's something like 40% black and brown people could end up with a reform councillor. It's very similar to Gorton and Denton in Manchester. You know, um, and that's the risk that we end up playing. So we've got to find ways of working together. We've got to find ways of working together, allying together, and making sure that we can drive home that message and drive home that change. Because this is it. We are it. We are that last line of defense right now. We are that shield that's going to stand up to protect our communities. And we talk about events like the Battle of Cable Street or Battle of Holbeck Moor in Leeds. And
If you could sum up, brother. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, Mothin. So
what's
can
that,
you,
sorry?
sorry, Mothin. If you could sum up when you can. Thank you, brother. Just because we're running.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
when we hear about those lessons, this is what we're doing right now. We are part of that movement, and our kids and our grandkids are going to tell our stories. So let's continue that build up, and let's continue that movement, and let's work together, and let's crush the far right once and for all.
Perfect. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you for that. Really appreciate the contribution. And yeah, I think we have, as Mothin said, we have an absolutely huge task ahead of us, but we can do that if we work together, if we unite. And again, I just want to emphasize the link in the chat. I think we need to see ourselves as multipliers here. We have 545 people here. If we can go back to our local areas, then, we can multiply and we can, talk about the campaign and reach people. I mean, if all of us go back to our local areas, which is what this link is about, it's directing you to get involved in the campaign in your area, then think about the change we can make and think about really the pushback we can do. So I want to now introduce our next speaker, and then we're going to come to some contributions. Again, 2 2-minute contributions. Somebody has said about an accessibility request, which is that if contributors can speak a bit slower, I'm probably speaking a bit too quick as well. So I think, just so people can sort of understand, that would be great. So I want to introduce our next speaker, which is Kim Johnson. She's the first Black Member of Parliament in Liverpool for Liverpool Riverside. She's an anti-racism campaigner, and really, we're really proud to have her here. So, Kim, if you'd like to take it away, that'd be great. Thank you.
Very much, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks for organising this very important launch. And it is great to be on a panel with such amazing speaker. And I want to thank the 500 odd for attending today and joining today, because it is really important. And I am a Black working class woman from Liverpool. I'm proud that I was elected as the first Black Labour MP for Liverpool. And I don't need anyone telling me about racism. We have a history of fighting the bastards in our streets and will continue to do so. But we need to ensure that people use their vote to go against reform. But let's make no mistake, Reform UK is a racist party and a danger to us all. And if we don't call them out and challenge their lies and misinformation and hatred, the future looks very bleak. But the prediction is they will gain many seats in the local elections, and we've got weeks to change this. And I'm very confident that we can do a great deal in terms of changing people's minds, changing their narrative, changing the misinformation that they keep talking about. Because we saw what happened on the 28th of March. We mobilised over 500,000 people who took to the streets. And we need to use those 500, as you've mentioned before, in terms of spreading the word, getting the message out, to call out the lies, to paint the very bleak picture of what happens if reform gains control. And God forbid a general election in 2029. But we do need to harness the support from across the country and the various groups that were involved. We've had the leader of the Muslim British movement on the call this evening, and we need to look at how we harness all of that support going forward. We need to build a bigger and a stronger movement, because, as we all know, we are the many and they are the few. And Reform, as we've already heard on the call tonight, are not the party of the working people. We know that is utter BS. It calls itself anti-establishment, but they very support the enemies of the working class. They voted against the ERA and all the rights that comes with that. They want to reduce minimum income for young people. And as we know, they want to dismantle the NHS. And we all know it's the working class who are more dependent on the NHS because of poverty and health inequality. And this will increase if they gain any more control of any more local authorities. And it's not the people arriving in rubber dinghies that brought this country to its knees, as we all know. It's the capitalists that travel on private jets. And we know that we saw in Gorton that how prepared they are to use racism and scapegoating to mask their real agenda of backing the wealthy, privatising public services and attacking trade unions. Farage wants to follow Trump's playbook, as we all know, because he's in the pockets of Elon Musk and Trump. They're talking about mass deportations and a British ICE. The far right are emboldened. And I helped by the fascists in Parliament. And since I was a teenager, I fought them on the streets of Liverpool, but I never, ever expected to fight them in Parliament when I was elected in 2019. And we know they are growing ever stronger and becoming more emboldened. And I have to say, I never expected my party, the Labour Party, to try and outdo reform, but that's exactly what they've been doing. And it started with the recall Runcorn and Helsby by-election, and now we're seeing Siobhan and Mahmood going far further to the right than ever the Tories did. And this narrative of hate and division used by Labour ministers has to stop. And comrades on this call should send emails to all ministers guilty of this shift to the right, including Starmer, and call for a reset. The Labour party values to return to what this party stands for. We need to take to the streets on the 16th of May. The Met Police have allowed Tommy Robinson and his gang to Unite the Kingdom march, and have denied Palestine Solidarity campaign the opportunity to commemorate the Nakba. So we need to make our voices heard. We need to take to the streets and let these fascists know that we're not going anywhere, because all this state and this government are doing at the moment is reducing our democratic rights, and we can't allow this to happen, because once they've gone, they've gone. But I also call on you on this call today to support Amina Hadi. He's spoken earlier. He was attacked by a fascist while on a demonstration in Manchester. And in what he didn't say, he's been suspended, and we need to support him in terms of getting his job back, but also calling on public sector organisations to not capitulate to the far right. And that's what the council did. So we need to unite together. We need to use everyone's vote to stop reform, because we are the many and they are the few scumbags. So solidarity, comrades.
Fantastic, Kim. Thank you so much. That was inspiring. I mean, just to echo the last point really, which is to support Amin, who is being targeted. And you can find the Amin Solidarity campaign, I'm sure, on social media, and if anyone's put it in the chat. But I think that's a really important. Amin is an anti-racist and a stalwart of the anti-racism movement in the north of England. So if people want to support that, then I think they really should. So I'm going to now introduce some contributions. So I'm going to bring some people in again. We want this people to be talking to each other. So it's 2 minutes each. So if the contributors can please stick to that, then that would be fantastic. So I'm going to introduce Moira, if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Just to echo what Mothin Ali said earlier in terms of reform taking advantage of the vulnerabilities of working class people, if there's one crisis that I think the working class are facing, it is around housing. And therefore, as somebody who lives around Grenfell, who's been impacted by the atrocity of Grenfell, it came as no surprise, given what we know about reform and what everyone's been saying about reform, that it's now ex-housing and infrastructure spokesperson Simon Dudley made that absolutely crass comment about Grenfell, that everybody dies in the end. We know reform is, a party at the moment led by has-been Tories. And the Grenfell community heard previously Rees-Mogg's comments on the Grenfell residents when he said they should have used common sense and self-evacuated. Reform has absolutely no regard for working class tenants. Previously, actually, Simon Dudley had said that people die on the roads because they drive cars, but we don't stop people driving cars. So why are we stopping houses being built because of Grenfell? I think he's forgotten the fact that actually we do include in the fact that we drive cars that people should actually wear seatbelts. They should stop at traffic lights. They shouldn't drink when they drive. Reforms, housing policies are clearly focused on removing some of the regulation, the safety regulation that's been introduced following Grenfell. Because reform, as everybody has said so far, actually want to promote developers. You know, they want to ensure that if we remove regulation, that developers can make more profit. But the second aspect of reform that, you know, people have pointed out, the glue that holds reform together is their anti-immigrant rhetoric. You know, they are claiming that they're going to prioritize in their social housing to ensure that actually foreign nationals go back to the back of the queue. You know, we need to debunk the myth that actually migrants are overrepresented in social housing, because they really are not. It's a complete lie that reform is promoting. You know, how the housing crisis is because of decades long failure to build council housing and planning laws that allow developers to build for profit and not for people. So I think one of the things that I think all the parties are going to be talking about in this election is housing and the housing crisis. And I think one of the ways that we can unite around the issues is that on the 18th of April, there's a national demonstration being called by 40 organisations. Many of the trade unions are supporting it. It's in London. I know people have been down to London for the Together recently, but we really, I think this is one area that we need to all come together and to stop reforms divisive lies about housing. You know, another housing system is
You can
possible.
sum up, comrades. Sorry, thank you.
Yep. So see you all on the 18th. Please promote it. There will be links in the chat as to how you can promote the 18th of April. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Moira. That is such an important point. The housing crisis is an anti-racist issue. So I'd like to introduce our next contributor. So I believe Rebecca is St. Andrews, I believe. Come in for 2 minutes. That'd be great. Oh, there we go. Scotland. Sorry. It's changed
Yeah,
your name.
sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm a student in St Andrews in Scotland, and I just want to talk about what we've been doing here. So a month or two ago, we set up a Women Against the Far Right group, and the main focus of our campaign has been challenging a small Reform UK society which has appeared and is trying to affiliate as a formal society with our student union. And we've been saying, that's completely unacceptable, and the union can't allow them to, can't give them formal status because it would normalize and legitimize their racism and Islamophobia and bigotry. So on one hand, we've been like building a case against them with the student union and working with a lot of officers in the student union who are really on board with what we're doing, which I think is really exciting. But trying to, challenge them wherever they come up and wherever they appear, and saying that there's no space for them anywhere in St Andrews and anywhere in Scotland. So about a month ago, they had a social in a bar, and we went along to have a chat with them, give them a bit of a telling off. Someone in our group got up and made a excellent speech, which was great, and we posted some clips of that on Instagram. And it kind of completely exploded. We had Jack Eccles, who's the Student for Reform president. He had a bit of a meltdown on social media, and Suella Braverman wrote a letter to our principal complaining about what we'd done. So, I think we have them completely running scared. They haven't attempted to do anything else since this. They haven't done any kind of events publicly. I think we've ostracized them and kind of knocked out any confidence they've had. They're not growing in St Andrews. And yeah, so it's been very exciting. The Suella Braverman letter was very exciting. But the point kind of underlying all of that is saying that, yeah, there's no place for them here, and we're going to challenge them wherever they go, on campus and, anywhere in our town. And like, I think that's what's been working for us, and that, is what we need to be doing nationally, is like challenge them in the formal avenues in elections and, there are student unions and all that, but also, challenge them and build protests and push them back wherever they come up. Because they are, as it stands at the minute, they are going to get affiliated to our student union. So we decided to call a protest on the day that they're going to go in and sign the agreement, and we're going to kind of model it after the Together demonstration and kind of unity marches that have been happening across Scotland to celebrate the diversity and multiculturalism of our town. Yeah, and say that the public doesn't want them here. So yeah, the other thing, obviously, Scotland has an election coming up. Ever has an election coming up in about a month. Stand Up to Racism Scotland has
You sum
produced
up,
nearly,
comrade. Sorry, thank you.
yeah, we're trying to mobilize people to kind of campaign against them in the elections as well, and it's been really exciting and kind of build this big campaign. But yeah, it's exciting to hear what everyone else is doing nationally. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that, Rebecca. Okay, so I just want to again flag in the chat, there's a link to get involved and, fly the torch of anti-racism back to your local area from this meeting. So please do sign up to that. I want to introduce our next speaker, who is Mohammad Asif. He is the director of the Glasgow-based Afghan Human Rights Foundation. He's an anti-racism campaigner and one of the loudest voices for refugee rights in Scotland. So please welcome Mohammad. Are you there, Mohammad? Have we got Mohammad? Okay, I think we're gonna call. Okay, let's. We'll change that around. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to call Andrea Egan, who is the General Secretary of Unison. As we mentioned earlier, the workers will be at the forefront and on the front lines of fighting against the far right, and Unison will most definitely be no different, and will be on the front line of the council elections in May, and also in the Senate and the Scottish Parliament elections in Scotland. So, really happy to introduce Andrea. Andrea Egan, please take it away. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, and well done for so many of you joining this call. I mean, for Unison, Unite and GMB public sector workers, Reform UK are an absolute growing threat to our members because of the public services our members deliver, but most importantly to us all because of the communities we all live in. And let me tell you, Unison is not ignoring this. And my message to my membership and the wider trade union movement is that we must do everything we can to push them back, including at the elections coming up next month on May the 7th. You know, when we look back just 2 years ago, the party didn't have one MP. But polling suggests that after the next general election, they could be the biggest party with over 330 members, meaning Nigel Farage could become our Prime Minister. And up to a couple of years ago, they didn't have one councillor either. But in 2025, they took control of 10 councils and became the biggest party in a further 4, and they won 2 mayoralties. Now, on May the 7th of this year, they will be putting up 5,000 candidates in the devolved nations, local government and the London elections. You know, so what's at stake? Well, 3 things. First of all, where Reform UK win power, we have seen firsthand as trade union members that they make life difficult for public sector trade union members. Our members in the Reform UK councils have reported an immediate culture shift after last May. Equality, diversity and inclusion scaled back to the minimum. Use of rooms for our black staff to meet has stopped. Pride flags have been banished and jobs threatened, especially if they're related to the environment and climate change issues. Secondly, Reform UK in power is really bad news for local government. Reform in power means broken promises on everything from council tax to bin collections. It means cuts, including closure of our care homes and health advice programmes. And it means people running our councils who are unfit for office. 1 in 10 Reform councillors have quit since last May, including those they've been exposed for racism, criminal activity and behaviour, and 1 for threatening to murder Keir Starmer. Now, third, if Reform UK do very well in May, it will give them even more momentum as we head towards the next general election. And even though that's still a long way off, victory this May gives them greater coverage, more donations, and a platform in all those communities that they do well in. And if they did win a general election, they've been very clear they'll scrap the Employment Rights Act. You know, And it's an end to our hard-earned rights that's been won through the trade union movement. Women's maternity rights, equal pay, disability rights, LGBT plus rights. And if we feel racism is becoming more widespread in our workplaces, with them in power, it will be normalised. They'll come for public sector pensions, and believe you me, they are okay pensions, but most of our members in local government are low-paid workers, and they certainly don't receive gold-plated pensions. But also, they will bring back austerity as if it were on steroids, and they will really put our NHS in real jeopardy and make life very difficult for our migrant workers. And in addition to those direct effects on us, they will divide our country. They're going to turn different parts of our communities against each other. So we have a duty to stand up and prevent this. Because for every minute that people spend pointing the fingers at the work colleagues, at the neighbours, or in the communities, is time lost, holding to account the real bleed on our public services. So we've got to think about how do we push back. The main thing is to recognise we all have a part to play. And that might be something as innocuous as having a conversation or sharing a social media post with a work colleague, a friend, or a family member. And also reminding people to vote. Or it might mean volunteering to help one of our allies, like Stand Up to Racism or the Together Alliance, who organised that historic demo a week last Saturday. In Unison, we've just launched our Standing Up to Reform UK campaign for our Unison members. So there's massive campaign guides which sets out a variety of options. Some are really easy and some are more demanding. But another key thing is to make sure that you use your vote where the elections are, where you live. And if you're not registered to vote, you need to register now. So there is, as you know, elections for the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Senate, and London boroughs. And in addition, there's local government elections across England. Finally, if you've not done so already, if you're a Unison member, then you can sign up to our Responding to Reform UK network. Excuse me. And this is a new initiative. It's about creating a group of Unison activists who are prepared to be part of a campaign. It is already up and running in advance of May the 7th, but it's something we are going to continue to grow and play a leading role in our campaign to the run-up to the next election. Comrades, we've got a challenge ahead of us, and nothing has threatened us more in our time than what's happening now. Excuse me. And we can either sit back and let it happen, or we stand up and fight back. We have a future to fight for, comrades. So solidarity to you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and I wish you the best with that cough as well. Thank you so much. It was cough or no cough. It was a fantastic speech, and I think we can all agree that again the workers' movement is going to be absolutely vital. If you're in Unison, get involved in that program and start the fight back. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker. She is the national organizer of Silence to Racism. She was one of the main driving forces behind the fantastic demonstration in the Together Alliance, and also always on the front lines fighting against the far right, no matter where it is around the UK. So I'm really honoured to introduce Samira Ali. Thank you so much, Samira.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hussein. And it's great to be on this meeting this evening with hundreds of people who are gearing up to stop reform in the May elections. I think we have a massive task on our hands, but we see the opportunity is there to break their vote in areas across the country. Look, I actually want to start with something that might be people might have been seeing a lot about recently, about Kanye West. People might have heard Farage's entered into the debate, if you like, about someone who had a song about Heiling Hitler not being allowed into Britain. I think Farage said that if we start banning people from entering the country because of what they say, he worries where that ends up. And it's a dangerous path to go down. Well, I'm not surprised by this. This is someone who famously at school went around saying that Hitler was right. But he says that he doesn't want to ban people based on what they say, but he's all okay with banning people from coming into the country based on where they come from or the colour of their skin. And he's worried about the dangerous path it leads to not let Kanye West into this country. I mean, where does it lead for what Reform want to do? Reform have announced just today, I think, actually, that they want to stop visas from about 20 Caribbean countries that are seeking reparations for slavery from Britain. They have also announced that they want to, when they get into power, if they get into power, they will carry out deportations of over 650,000 people in this country. I think someone said it before, but if you want to see what that would look like, just look at what's happening in with Trump and ICE in the US. That murderous racist force that's been unleashed onto the streets of places like Minneapolis, that's exactly the kind of force that Reform UK and Farage want to bring onto our British streets and into our communities and so on. So Trump's politics here is what Reform will bring. And I think if we want to look at the caliber of Reform candidates that are coming out, people might see they're already dropping like flies. I think about 5 people that were meant to be candidates in the Senate, I'm sure Hussein can correct me, have already had to stand down or be removed. There's someone called Corey Edwards, who is a Senate candidate. He had to go because he'd done a Nazi salute. I think of the councillors that were already in for Reform. I think 20 have already been removed. Many more have had to resign in disgrace. So Farage's promised vetting process seems to have not improved beyond the general election, clearly. And these are exactly the type of people that Reform attracts into their ranks: bigots, sexist, racists, and the likes. And what happens when Reform does get into councils? What do? They attack workers. They actually put up council tax as opposed to what they promised. They slash DEI and the jobs that go with it and wreak general havoc in our local council. And as Andrea said before, the council workers are on the front line of that, know all too well what Reform councils mean. And also Reform gaining in our areas or Reform taking another leap forward at the elections, it gives confidence to every racist across this country. It gives confidence to every person that's tried to go and protest outside a refugee hotel to have it shut down or worse. And it gives confidence to the worst people like Tommy Robinson, who wants to call a demonstration on the 16th of May in central London. We cannot let that be a victory march for the far right off the back of a success for Reform in the May elections. And we can't let him go unopposed on the day. And that's why we'll be teaming up with the Palestine movement to have mass anti-racist opposition on the streets of London. But look, I think sometimes it can feel hard or like the might of Reform is a bit unstoppable, or that they have all the momentum. But I think the mood has shifted. I think that our movement held back at the far right on the 28th of March when over 500,000 people marched against the far right with the Together Alliance on the biggest anti-racist protest this country has ever seen. I think that gives our side a massive boost, and it also shows that when we get organised, we can stop the far right and Farage and the likes. So look, that's what the campaign is about. That's what, we want to stop Reform UK across the country. We want to expose Reform as the millionaires and the bosses and the bankers that they are. That Farage is far from the man of the people he likes to pretend he is, that they're the people that want to destroy the NHS that migrants in this country have built, that they're the party of the Tories, and in their own words, are the most pro-business they'll be the most pro-business government that this country's ever seen. That is what Reform is. It's not a party for working people. But we also have to take on their racism because we know how dangerous it is and where it leads. But we also have to argue that it's not refugees, migrants, and Muslims that are to blame for the problems in our society. It's exactly the people that Farage represents and those at the top of society, and actually those in government right now who are laying out the carpet for Farage and Reform UK with their own racist scapegoating and attacks on migrants. And the campaign, just to say that we also have, we've heard from people speaking about Women Against the Far Right on this call, which is brilliant. Women Against the Far Right are also going to be having a leaflet in the May elections, which is about exposing Farage for the sexist he is, as well as the racist, that he wants to put the debate on abortion rights back on the table after women have so hard fought for that he's the friend of Donald Trump in the US, that he thinks Andrew Tate is a good role model for children, and he's the one who wants to try and blame refugees for problems of sexism in our society, but actually we know it's exactly people like him and the far right that make women unsafe. So the campaign is going to be a big one. We know that there's a big threat, so we have to scale a massive challenge. We want to produce 1 million leaflets that say 5 reasons to not vote for Reform UK and put them through as many letterboxes and into as many hands of people in our areas as we can. But we know we can't just we have to have a targeted approach. We're going to have target wards in every area that we know that we can have the best chance of stopping Reform UK. And obviously there's going to be these 2 big days of action in April and May, where we want, hundreds of activists and trade unionists and students and the likes out in our areas leafleting against Reform UK. So there's a huge task on our hands, but we're going to take the fight to reform to stop them in the elections. We're going to take the fight to those in government now who want to give confidence to reform as well. And we're going to take the fight to Tommy Robinson on the 16th of May in London. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Samira. Yes, we will be taking the fight to Tommy Robinson. We'll be taking the fight to Nigel Farage, and we'll be taking the fight to all those billionaire backers as well. But we need to do it, as we keep mentioning, with people power, because we don't have those billionaire backers. So if you want to be involved, please do, again, look at the link, sign up to the link, join your local Sam's Racing group and get out there campaigning. Samira referenced it. I'm from Cardiff, and we have the Senate elections. So I'm really happy to introduce our next speaker, who I've stood next to many a time against the far right, whether that's on demonstrations or on various panels. So I'm really proud to introduce a real left-wing icon of Wales, if I can say that, Leanne Wood, who is the former leader of Plaid Cymru. Go ahead, Leanne. Yeah, sorry, we can't hear you, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now we can. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah? Okay, great. Diolch yn fawr iawn a noswaith dda. Good evening to you all. It's really good to see so many people on this call who want to come together to oppose the far right. I spend time on Facebook, probably too much for my own good. There, it's easy to believe that there's an overwhelming tide of people ready to rise up and start a civil war. In the real world, that isn't how it is. So I would recommend to everyone on this call, ahead of the next elections in May, go out canvassing. Go out and speak to people on their doorsteps. Leaflets are great, but often they go from the doorstep to the bin. Speaking to people is how you change minds and how we change narratives. Now, in the real world, real people are having very different conversations, and those conversations can change our perspectives of what's going on as well. Pick the party that's most likely to defeat reform in your area, get in touch with them and ask them if you can go canvassing with them. You don't need to be a member. They'll welcome you, I'm sure. We've got Senedd elections in May, and a lot is at stake. We've heard hate presses the emotion buttons, it generates anger, it generates fear. It's easy to get people to scapegoat others. And after years of austerity and pay squeezes, people want support and they're not getting it. So in this cost of living crisis, blame can then easily be directed to those who are perceived to be getting government support whether that perception is real or not. So disabled people, people with mental health conditions, neurodivergent people, anyone on benefits, and of course, asylum seekers. And because of the dog whistling rhetoric by not just the far-right politicians, but all too often the centrist mainstream politicians as well, our communities are at grave risk of being divided. In addition to all of this, in Wales, the Welsh language and even the future of devolution has been included in the far right's culture wars. So they have to be stopped. 90 years ago this coming June, Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists attempted to hold a rally in Tonypandy, just a mile away from where I live in the Rhondda. They were met with 6,000 anti-fascist protesters made up of miners and local people who said no passaran. The rally did not go ahead and Mosley didn't attempt to rally in the Rhondda again. Now, the same arguments that were deployed by the British Union of Fascists then are being used today for exactly the same reasons. Our elections this May follow the Caerphilly by-election, which has been referenced, which was held last October. I want at this point to pay tribute to the work of the Valleys Stand Up to Racism, who've leafleted, who've spoken to people at a local level. They've held street stalls and counter demonstrations to neo-fascists. Everyone came together in Caerphilly and the anti-reform vote coalesced around Plaid Cymru in a similar way in which it coalesced around the Greens in Gorton and Denton. And that's exactly what we have to do again. The Senedd election will no doubt be dominated by the culture war questions that the far right brings to the table. We all know the issues that divide people. Plaid Cymru and the Greens have shown that we can win when we stand with those people who are being bullied by the culture wars, when we stand up to bullies. And we must stand up to bullies in whatever way we're able to. Thankfully, the main conversations, as I've said, in the real world do not reflect the conversations that take place on social media, which, let's face it, has become an absolute cesspit. And so conversations with one-to-one with people, especially those people who haven't swallowed the bottle of red pills, are bearing fruit. Many people get it when we point out that the vast wealth they want us distracted because they want to build vast wealth. Conscious people in working class communities get divide and rule, and we don't like it. So our task is to do the opposite. Our task is to bring people together in our communities. I now work in community energy. There's a network of people working on community ownership, bringing people together in communities for something. It's not just against something that we can bring people together. And that's something everybody can be a part of. We all live in a community. We can all join together with others in our local area to build something positive for our community, something inclusive and something good. And that's something each and every one of us can do to counter the politics of hate and division. Today, I've started a Substack. I've ventured into a new area of social media, but the idea is to share information and analysis in the run-up to the Senedd elections in May. So I would invite all of you to follow or subscribe or do whatever you do on Substack. I'd also invite the more bolshy among you to visit my Facebook page and get stuck into tussling with some of the reform apologists and far-right activists who tend to visit on a daily basis. The Substack will hopefully result in less noise and more substance. There is something all of us can do, from social media interaction and engagement to getting out and knocking doors to delivering leaflets that are going to be made available ahead of the elections in May. Stand Up to Racism are organising in local branches, so if you're not already connected, just get in touch with like-minded people, and there's always something that we can do together, because hope comes from taking action. So let's all do what we can to foster hope in place of anger and love instead of hate. And remember, no.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Leanne. That was fantastic. Okay, great. So we're on to the final stretch now. I want to introduce just two more contributions, and then we'll finish up. So this has been such a fantastic meeting, and there's so many people here, so we need to turn that into action. So I want to introduce. Let me have a look. If I could introduce Pablo to contribute for 2 minutes, if that's okay. Is Pablo there? Um, Okay, what we'll do then is we'll introduce the final speaker. So to round up the whole meeting, which is a contribution, but I'm sure all of us want to hear what he has to say, as he's been a big part of Sam's Racing for many, many years, and has often been the face of the fight against the far right in the UK against those such as Tommy Robinson and all those that came before him and have come after him. So I want to introduce Wayman Bennett. So Wayman, would you like to finish off the meeting for us? That would be fantastic.
I want to finish with a hope and a nightmare. And I'll start with the nightmare. Runcorn. Do you remember the Runcorn election when the candidate won by 6 votes? And I believe that in every constituency where reform is, there's an organisation that can stop that from happening, and that's us, really, in terms of making sure that that doesn't happen. And we should be clear about something else. Reform is mentioned in the leader of the reform is mentioned 17 times in the Epstein files, right? He didn't get there by accident. It's because he mixes with every single scumbag inside the world, including Trump, who just announced that he wants to eradicate an entire civilization. I think we should be really clear about something else. I've seen in other elections, the BNP electoral case, where they were beaten, and they were beaten actually by local campaigns. Don't listen to McSweeney, where he said that he came in there and put in right-wing politics and people believed it. He was beaten by community politics. He's beaten by people on the ground with trade unions, socialists, people coming together and rejecting that. And the majority of working class people actually respond to that. The biggest weapon we have is our own leadership. Everybody on this call is a leader. All your friends are leaders. All your people in different communities are leaders. And if you organize them, remember, the far right have 30% of the population. We have 70% of the population. Malcolm X said, you're out, you can be out organized, but you're not outnumbered. The real question is, can we organize enough of our people to get those leaflets out, to have those conversations, to remember who we are? That those people that talked about speaking for us do not speak for us. We need to expose every single one of their candidates for who they are. And remember, the candidate inside Runcorn, what's the first thing she said? She was sick and tired of black and brown faces or people from working class people on TV. I'm sick and tired of her face. I'm sick and tired of Farage's face. And if we're going to put them in the dustbin of history, we have to use the election as a way of pushing them back. But also, we have to use that momentum to make sure that when Tommy Robinson comes onto the street, that we fight them electorally, and we also fight them on the streets. And when we do those two things, it gives rise to a new movement, as we saw on the 28th. And this movement is not just about pushing back fascism, it's about pushing back for a newer hope. And that's the reason why the campaign around Stand Up to Racism is about burying all the reactionary stuff, but it's also opening the door for something which is much better because it shows our side at their best. I said the Nazis can't dance, and I still believe that. They have no culture, they've got nothing to contribute to us. And the only battle for the future that we have is solidarity and unity. If we put those two things together in an organised fashion, we can push back reform, but also we can build a new army that puts forward new demands. I'll stop there because I know that people have been on this call for a long time. But as I said, we should both make sure the nightmare doesn't happen, but let's make sure the dream happens as well. Farage fumbling about why he lost inside May the 7th, and all those people push back. We want him to be like Matt GPT, the guy who lost inside Manchester, who can't understand why he lost. It's because people hate him. And then we made sure that everybody who hated him organised together, because you're losers. And if we make them losers, we can make ourselves winners. And I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Wayman. Okay, thank you so much for everyone joining the meeting today. I think it's fair to say that, and what the Together Alliance March showed, is that there might be some reform voters out there who don't really want to vote reform, but there's a lot more anti-racists who want to fight back against reform and who just don't want to vote them. We need to mobilize those people. We need to be the ones that take our torches back of anti-racism back to our local areas and get them involved in campaigns. And to do that, they need to be part of the Stop Reform UK campaign, which you can find in the chat. Please send that link, join it, and send it to all the people you know to join that campaign. Let's fight against reform. Let's push back the tide against the far right, and let's build a better UK, and let's build an anti-racist UK. Thank you so much all for joining. Please, again, you can find the link in the chat. Please join it, join the campaign, and thank you so much for everyone coming to the launch today. Thank you so much.